Welcome back inside Uplift Property Management. I'm Tommy Perfect, CEO and Managing Broker here at Uplift, and today I want to talk to you guys about rent control in Temecula. So really the big question is there rent control specifically for Temecula? I know we have California stuff, but is there something in Temecula that is going to affect me and my rental properties? Quick answer is no. There is no specific city or county regulations regarding rent control. However, we still are in California, and we do need to follow the whole state laws and regulations regarding rent control. That all falls under California AB 1482. This is often referred to as the California Tenant Protection Act of 2019. There have been a lot of different modifications to the Tenant Protection Act of 2019, but mainly this is going to talk about a specific group of properties, namely multifamily properties, and it goes into specific actions on those multifamily properties regarding how much you can increase your rent and also what kind of reasons you can give notice to these tenants. The main first step of understanding the Tenant Protection Act of 2019 is understanding what properties this actually applies to. This law was actually targeted toward multifamily properties. And when I talk about multifamily properties, this is 2 units or more on a property. So when I get into a 4-plex, an 8-plex, a 60-unit apartment building, yes, I'm gonna have rent control. However, there are a lot of exceptions to that rule. The other type is a little bit on property ownership, and when you talk about corporations, REITs, and LLCs that don't have only persons, natural persons as ownerships, those are also going to be properties that are included. The exemptions we talk about are single-family homes and condos. If you just have that single-family home, that condo, those are not rent-controlled units anymore. There's no legislation regarding what you can do for your rent increases or those just cause evictions. You also have owner-occupied duplexes. So I know I talked about it being applied toward multifamily, and you would think, hey, a duplex is multifamily, but one exemption is if the owner actually resides in one of those units. That duplex or the other one rented out unit is not included within the coverages of AB 1482. There are also some other small exclusions for newly built units that receive their certificate of occupancy within the last 15 years, and also some very special circumstances regarding affordable housing. Obviously those ones already have their own slew of regulations that they have to work through with their local housing authority. So those ones are not covered under this AB 1482 protection. Now that we know what properties rent control applies to, let's talk about what those rules look like for those properties that are included in the coverages of AB 1482 in California. First off, rent control, right? The max amount of rent you can increase. That is 5% plus the local CPI for housing. They tell us to go based off the April number, but hey, the Bureau of Labor Statistics doesn't actually provide an April number, so usually we go based off the March number, and then that gets applied that following August for that following entire calendar year. So for example, we'll take the March of 2024 number, it gets applied for all rent increases going into effect August 2024 all the way through July of 2025. Then we'll see that March of 2025 number and apply that for August of 2025. Currently right now in Temecula, Riverside, San Bernardino, Ontario, that number for CPI was 3.3. So 5% plus 3.3% gives us a max increase of 8.3% for this calendar year, all the way up until August 2025, where we'll have that new number released and made known for us. What happens if CPI is more than 5%? 5 plus 5 gives us a max increase of 10. So if the CPI is actually 12%, and we've seen different CPIs go much higher than the 5% increase in certain counties in California, but you're capped at a maximum of a 10% rent increase if CPI plus 5% exceeds that 10% increase. These rent increases really only apply to a tenant during their lease. So if their lease comes up at the end of a year and you're gonna increase their rent, that's where this cap is applied to, right? So, or if they're month-to-month tenants and after whatever period of time that you have them, you want to give them rent increase, it's capped at this. Again, there's a couple other small rules. One, you're only allowed to increase the rent twice per year, and between the two of them, it can't be more than 10% off of that first initial basis amount. So you can't do 5% now and then 5% again in 6 months on top of it, because then you would actually be a little bit more than 10%, right? You have to do 5% of the first amount, and then if you want to do again, 5% again of that first amount, not the increased amount again. So you need to make sure that you're staying compliant and making sure that your cap doesn't go above the 5% plus CPI or the maximum of 10%, whichever is lower. This is something that you can get around when somebody moves out. You aren't limited on how much you're allowed to re-rent the property out for. So when you go and find a new tenant, you can market that and get market rent even if you were severely under market before. In closing up and summarizing, what should you do as the landlord of a property that is covered? You need to figure out first if you're covered or if you're exempt. If you are covered, then you need to make sure you understand the rules. If you're exempt, you need to actually have some documentation in your lease regarding that as well. Second, if you are covered, stick to those rent cap rules. And frankly, I recommend everybody stick to these rent cap rules, even if you aren't covered, unless you have a special circumstance where you actually have severely under market rent and tenants that are capable of paying more. There's just some really good things that you can do as a landlord to create longer tenancies and actually increase your ROI without necessarily keeping your property all the way at market rent 100% of the time. Again, there are some just cause eviction rules. We can talk about those in more detail. Feel free to call us if you want to know about just cause and those reasons why you would have somebody move out. Those are some protections in this ordinance, but it's not about rent control in that. There are some disclosure requirements in your lease. So if you are covered, you have to disclose that and have a specific addenda in your lease that goes over AB 1482, the Tenant Protection Act of 2019. And if you're exempt, you also have to have very specific language that's listed in the law of what you have to say that your property is excluded from rent control as well. So those are a few of the things you need to do as a landlord. As a tenant, this does help you. It protects you from some large rent hikes when you're a covered property, and it protects you from a landlord taking advantage of you for just trying to squeeze you for every penny that you're worth. So some of these things are really good. I know that landlords, this is a real hot topic, a sticking point for a lot of people, especially when it comes around to getting rid of your property, selling it, renovating it, trying to get a new tenant in, and there's a lot of restrictions around that. However, it is something that allows us to really be high quality landlords that actually uplift people in our community rather than just treating people like they're another paycheck. So these are great opportunities for us to be better landlords and better humans in our society.